Welcome everybody, Brother Dan Goodwin here, God's Final Jubilee Ministries, godsfinaljubilee.com, and our YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed, if you're just visiting today, we invite you to click the subscribe button down below, and you get an alert every time we come on. We come on about a week ago, we did a program, and we try to do at least one a week, and eventually we're going to be doing a lot more. But this is a prophecy channel. My main thing is prophecy. My newest book is right here, The Mystery of the Jubilee. And I've written several books. One of them has been a bestseller. It's called God's Final Jubilee. Most of that is in here in some form or the other. But I got a book called The Barley Harvest. We got several DVDs that you can get. They'll be a big help to you. But we want to come to you tonight and share some interesting things. We're right in the middle of a shutdown. This is Sunday night, day 2 of the government shutdown. And I was joking earlier that, my goodness, what are we going to do? How are we going to eat? How are we going to survive? The government has shut down. I'd like to see them leave it shut down a while and let us realize how unneeded those people are in Washington. And the truth is, 3/4 of that monster up there in Washington, D.C. could be shut down, and we'd be better off for it. So they talk about shutting down all non-essential government things. If they're non-essential, get rid of them. Why are we paying for that trash? My goodness, the government has gotten so big, and it's in the way, and it's messing with us all the time. All right, well, the topic tonight is very simple, but very exciting. The topic tonight is this: the 4-page memo that could wound the beast. The 4-page memo that could wound the beast. I'm talking about the memo that Mr. Assange, the WikiLeaks guy, has offered $1 million if somebody will give that to him, send that to him. I wonder how many of you don't know what I'm talking about when with this memo, the 4-page memo. The 4-page memo, if you don't know, of course, if you're watching CNN or any of those mainstream fake news places, and by the way, there's some fake news on Fox as well, just not as much. But there's some junk on there too. I get so mad even at Fox sometimes that I shut them off. I can't stand it. There are some liberals, some pretty serious liberals on Fox News just as well. So, but there's a lot of good ones too, and I want to give credit where credit's due. Sean Hannity on Thursday night did his first 25 minutes of his program was all about the 4-page memo. It's on my Facebook page, God's Final Jubilee Facebook. If you haven't seen that 25-minute broadcast, I would encourage you to go watch that. Very, very exciting. This is huge. This is the biggest political scandal in the history of America. And it's the 4-page memo is what it's about. 4-page memo is the proof that they've been looking for of the Russia collusion and the Mueller thing and the Mr. Comey of the FBI and a whole bunch of other people, and Mr. Obama, Miss Hillary Clinton, and all this stuff. What they have found is the proof that the collusion with Russia has nothing to do with Mr. Trump. It has everything to do with the Democrats and the Hillary campaign and the DNC and the FBI and some other bigwigs, and even the assistant attorney general right now is involved in this. And by the way, he went to the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan. He went to him and asked him not to allow this memo to be released. And the Speaker, Paul Ryan, told him no way. He's not getting in the way of it. He's going to let these guys look at it. In other words, he didn't want all of Congress to get to see it. So this memo was seen by the Intelligence Committee. Devin Nenyu, or whatever his name is one behind this that has uncovered this and is bringing the light on it. And he showed it to the Intelligence Committee, and they were shocked. Now, the Republicans were shocked. And many of them went on television telling that it was shocking, and they've been in this a long time, and they were shocked by this. It's that serious. They want this to be released to the American people. Now, it was released to Congress, and like I said, the Assistant Attorney General asked Paul Ryan not to let Congress see this memo. My goodness, he should have called the master at arms, should have called the police and had the guy arrested for trying to hold back evidence. Why wouldn't he want the Congress to see this? That's what you ought to ask yourself. We got this memo. It's only 4 pages long. It can be read in minutes. The Security Committee there, National Security Committee, has read this memo. Now everybody in Congress that wants to has access to this memo. I don't know how many of them have, but what they want to do is release this to the American public so that we get to see what this memo, what we believe the memo is, that it gives names and explains what happened, what the report was all about, the dossier. Remember the guy, the MI6 guy in England, in Britain, UK, who the equivalent of our CIA over here. He was in charge of this, although he didn't write it and he didn't prove any of it. They got a bunch of stuff supposedly on Trump to try to overturn the election and give it to Hillary. And well, it didn't work. And now this dossier was used by the FBI. In fact, they put money into it. It's a fake dossier, bunch of fake information out of Russia. The FBI thought was, or we think they thought that it was real, but maybe now we're realizing they knew it wasn't real, but they too were using it to keep Trump from getting elected. And so we've got all that, and then we got the fact that they used that dossier, and not only that, the dossier was used to go before a judge to get a FISA warrant. In other words, to get permission to spy on Americans. Who did they spy on? Trump Tower. And by the way, Trump got wind of it. That's in the news as well. He got wind of that by somebody, and he moved out of Trump Tower, went somewhere else, and had his meetings because he knew he was being listened to. You think Watergate was bad? Watergate was kindergarten compared to this stuff. Now, I said a year ago, before the election, I said, I'm on record saying this. You can go back and check my Facebook over a year ago and you can see. I said a year ago, this is the most important election in the history of America for the Democrats, not just us, but for the Democrats as well, because if Mr. Trump got elected, there would be people going to jail. I said that, and I still believe that. Now, a year has gone by. Mr. Trump got elected, shocked all of them. Nobody thought he was going to win. I knew he was going to win, all right? I didn't know, but I was pretty sure. I was on record the day of the election, or the night before the election, I was on record saying that Trump will win by a landslide unless there's some kind of corruption that we can't control. He was in Michigan speaking to a crowd of 30 or 40,000 people, a blue state. Now, you can't do that and lose an election. And that happened everywhere he went. And I just couldn't see, there's just no way, apart from corruption, that this man could lose. Well, guess what? He didn't lose. And God gave us a breather here. God gave us a miracle. Whether you like Mr. Trump or not, whether you think he's a Christian or not, that doesn't matter. God put a man in office that's turning some things around, and it's giving us some hope again. And I think God put him there more for Israel than he did for us, but that's another story. So they used this dossier to get permission to spy on a political party that was running for president against the Democrats. And now, of course, this dossier was full of fake stuff. It was stuff that was unproven, and so the whole thing's a sham. One representative or one senator said that when this comes out, this will be the end of the Mueller investigation, because the Mueller investigation is all based on a facade, all based on a faulty foundation of this fake dossier. And there is no proof and nothing, anything that shows that Mr. Trump had anything to do with Russia as far as, now we all heard Mr. Obama on that, remember the mic that was on, the hot mic thing, and he told Russia, he told the ambassador, whoever it was, to let Mr. Putin know that I'll be more flexible after the election. Nobody seemed to care about that. If that's not collusion, you know. So this is a four-page memo that's been released. It took months and months and months to get this memo because some in the Justice Department are fighting this. And I'm finding that it's not necessarily Mr. Sessions, because he recused himself. It's the Assistant Attorney General who is fighting the release of these documents that Congress has been wanting. So anyway, we've got, it's been released. Some of these things have been released. They have this. They found incriminating things, names, and all that. So this 4-page document, now what do I mean by the statement, the 4-page memo that can wound the beast? Well, let me read a verse for you here. In the Bible, there are 3 chapters: Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Revelation 13, verses 1 and 2. Let me give you them again. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Revelation 13 all talk about the same world kingdoms. In my book, The Mystery of the Jubilee, if you have this, on page 241, no, 241. I don't know if you can see that, but I have a chart in there. On page 241, there's a chart that lists what I'm talking about. I've got the world kingdoms. I've got Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, and Revelation 13. I show that the kingdoms of the world that are spoken of in those 3 chapters are all the same kingdoms that in Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Revelation 13. They're all spoken of a little different, but they're speaking of the same world empires. For instance, Daniel chapter 2, you know the story. King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He calls his soothsayers together and says, "Tell me what the dream meant." And they say, "Oh, king, tell us the dream and we'll tell you what it meant." The king didn't know the dream, he forgot it. So he wants them to tell them not only what the dream meant, he wants them to tell him what his dream was. Well, they can't do it. Of course, Daniel does. Daniel comes along, he prays, and God reveals to Daniel the dream and the interpretation of the dream. And to make a long story short, Daniel tells him that there were 4 kingdoms, really 5, but there's Babylon, represented by a head of gold, and Nebuchadnezzar is that head of gold. The chest and arms of silver is the Media-Persia Empire that's going to take over when Babylon goes off the scene. And then Greece is going to come along, 322 BC. That's the belly and thighs of brass. And then Rome comes along. The legs of iron, that's Rome, 63 BC, and they're going to rule for 500 years. These are world kingdoms. And they're likened unto metals and gold, precious things that men want and desire, right? Nebuchadnezzar is excited. Hey, I'm the head of gold. He's excited about that. Rome is the feet of iron. They trampled the world, and their empire grew with the sword and with the trampling of soldiers' feet. And well, there's another kingdom coming that's not here yet. It's kind of here, but not officially. And that's what I believe is the revived Roman Empire. It's going to be the feet in iron of clay and the 10 toes. That's the 10 kingdoms that eventually will be ruled by one man, the Antichrist, Revelation 6. Well, that same story is told again to Daniel. Daniel has a dream in Daniel chapter 7. So, Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He sees the kingdoms of the world as precious metals and wonderful things, gold and silver and brass. And then Daniel has a dream. He sees some wild beasts. He sees a lion with eagle's wings. He sees a bear, a leopard, and then he sees a dreadful beast, and then he sees the 5th one, the 10 horns. So instead of the 10 toes, he sees the 10 horns. Now what's this about? It's the same story. Daniel sees the same 4 or 5 kingdoms that Nebuchadnezzar saw, only Daniel sees them from heaven's perspective. Nebuchadnezzar saw them from man's perspective. That's how man looks at the kingdoms of the world. Gold and silver and precious things. And how does God look at the kingdoms of the world? A lion, a bear, a leopard, a dreadful beast, 10 horns. God looks at the kingdoms of the world as wild beasts. Now don't ever forget that. God looks at the kingdoms and the governments of the world not as precious things. He looks at them as wild beasts. And what about a wild beast? I'll tell you something about a beast. You can't tame a beast. You can only chain it up. By the way, our forefathers understood that. Our forefathers gave us the Constitution for what? For chains around the feet of the government to restrain it. Because they knew that the government couldn't be tamed, it could only be chained. That's why they gave us the Second Amendment, by the way. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with firearms and hunting. The Second Amendment is in case the beast gets out of control and we have to overtake him. That's what the second, nobody wants to say that, but that's what it's for. The Second Amendment is so that we, the people, can be armed in case the beast gets out of control and we need to take action. All right. By the way, those of you watching on Facebook, some of you are asking my signs backwards. It's because the iPhone, I turned the iPhone around this time, and so the background is backwards. I know about it. It's just there's nothing I can do about it. So, so these 4 kingdoms, actually 5. The 5th is the everlasting kingdom that Christ comes and sets up and rules. So Daniel sees those kingdoms as wild beasts. And that's what I wanted you to understand. Revelation, you get to Revelation 13 verses 1 and 2. And again, these kingdoms are mentioned, but they're mentioned a little different in Revelation. In Revelation, he says this, the beast which I saw, verse 2, was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power. He's talking about those same kingdoms, but he mentions them backwards. Did anybody know why? Do you know why he mentions them backwards? Because Revelation 13 is John going in reverse. He's looking at the kingdoms starting from the Antichrist kingdom, going all the way back to Babylon in 605 BC. So he's looking at the kingdoms, same kingdoms, but he's looking backwards at them. So he's listing them backwards on a chart where Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7 is listing the kingdom starting with Babylon going forward all the way to the Antichrist kingdom. All right, so, but again, Revelation 13 talks about a beast, a lion, a bear, a leopard, a dreadful beast, 10 horns, a wild beast that cannot be tamed. My friend, the government can't be tamed. Your government. See, we tend to think America is different than all the other kingdoms of the world. No, we ain't. America is a government, is a system. It's a wild beast that's out of control. Washington, D.C. has become a fat monster. And it's unbelievable the corruption and evil that's coming out of that place. So what's going on? This memo, what I'm saying is this, the 4-page memo could wound the beast. What beast am I talking about? I'm talking about the beast of America, the American government. A lot of people used to call the government behind the scenes the shadow government. Now we've got a new term for it. It's being called the deep state. You've heard that, I'm sure. In other words, there are men behind the scenes that are pulling strings and are running things. Yes, there's people in the public spotlight, but there's people behind the scenes that are involved in influencing men and moving their agendas. And you got the United Nations right there, and it's a wild beast, and every year that wild beast needs more food. Taxes. Do you realize? This is on the Drudge Report. Record taxes are being brought in right now. More taxes than in the history of America are being brought into the coffers of our government. And yet, the budget deficit is grown and keeps growing. The national debt's around $20 trillion, and the budget deficit, which means we're continuing to not keep up with the debt, so it keeps growing. The deficit is growing, even though we bring in more taxes. Why is that? Because the government's run by men. It's a monster. It will not restrain itself, and if the people of this country do not rise up and restrain that beast up there, then we're doomed. We're doomed. $20 trillion. Now that's just money we know about. There's money, there's debt that we can't even understand in the different markets out there that are going to come due, and we can't pay them. So why is this happening? Because we've got a beast, and that beast has shook off the chains of restraint. And now the government does not fear the people. The people fear the government. Why? Because the government is a wild beast that cannot be tamed, and that beast has shook off the chains of the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution about dealing with illegal immigrants. There's nothing in the Constitution about welfare. There's nothing in the Constitution about providing medical money for anybody, medical insurance. So what's happening? The government's out of control. The 4-page memo could wound the beast. How? Because it could stab that beast and reveal to the American people what's going on behind the scenes, the corruption, some of the corruption. Now, how is that memo going to be revealed? I'm going to share with you an article that I've got up here. I'm waiting on it. It's here. There we go. This is an article in Zero Hedge. You can find that for yourself. It's zerohedge.com. This is an article about what we're talking about. And if I can get it to cooperate here. Here we go. All right. The article gives 4 ways that this 4-page document could be released. Remember now, this is classified. The 4-page document, or memo as they call it, is classified, which means we can't look at it. By the way, the committee that has this, they have security clearances. They were allowed to look at it. They voted to let everybody in Congress look at it. So all 435 men and women in Congress have the ability to look at this. Now, some of them have, and I don't know if everyone has, but the American people cannot look at it, and the people who have seen it are not allowed to share that document. You can't remove it from the room. You can't take a picture of it. You can't discuss it. So how can we get that document out? They're calling for this document to be released to us so that we can see it, the American people, so that the American people can see the corruption that went on and is going on so that justice can be had. But it's not been released yet. It should have been released already. I don't know. There's no reason for this to be delayed. These people need to let this out there. Now here's what Zero Hedge has on its article here. 4 ways that this could be released, the American people could see it. Number 1, Trump can declassify anything he wants. So Trump, Mr. Trump, President Trump, right now, anytime he wants, he could make the decision to declassify this document. He could do it right now. And it would be out of the hands of Congress. It would be out of the hands of the Intelligence Committee. It would be declassified, and we would all be able to see it. He can do that. All classification by the U.S. government has no basis in laws passed by Congress, with one tiny exception. All classification is based on presidential executive orders, which rely on the president's constitutional role as commander-in-chief. According to the Supreme Court, the president's power to classify and control access to information bearing on national security flows primarily from the constitutional investment of power in the president. They're saying the president can declassify this anytime he wants to. So that's the House. If the House Intelligence Committee releases a version of its memo without the supporting documentation, in other words, we need not only the memo declassified, we need to see the documentation that goes with it that proves the memo. All right. There's a second thing that could happen. The House and Senate Intelligence Committees can declassify any material they possess. So the President could declassify it. The Intelligence Committee can declassify it. Number 3, the Constitution protects members of Congress from prosecution for any speech or debate. Now, let me say this again. Number 2 was the House and Senate Intelligence Committees can declassify any material. According to the procedural rules of both houses of Congress, their intelligence committees can declassify material in their possession if the committee votes that such declassification would be in the public interest. It is then declassified after 5 days because the president has 5 days to veto that and tell them that they can't. And then it's just like a majority. They can overrule. They can overrule his veto. So if the president It is then declassified after 5 days unless the president formally objects. If the president does object, the full chamber votes on the question. The full chamber can vote and overrule his objection. So, number 3. The Constitution protects members of Congress from prosecution for any speech or debate in either house. This is interesting. Number 3, the way this memo can get out is this. Any congressman who has read this can stand up in the House or in the Senate and give a speech and talk about that memo. That's what he's saying. Members of Congress have legal immunity for acts they commit as part of the legislative process. Article 1, Section 6, Clause 1 of the Constitution states that for any speech or debate on either House, Senator, or Representative, shall not be questioned in any other place. It is his constitutional shield that this constitutional shield that protected Senator Mike Gravel of Alaska from legal consequences back in 1971 when he read sections of the Pentagon Papers, which were classified, during a meeting of the Senate Subcommittee on Public Buildings and Grounds, and then placed the rest of the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record. And he got away with that because they're immune. They cannot be tried for anything they say in there. Well, interesting, huh? There's a 4th way. All right, so you got this. There's 4 ways in this article that this memo could become public information to you and I. Number 1, the president could declare it tonight. He could declare it declassified. Number 2, Congress can vote and declare it declassified, which means we get to see it. Number 3, anybody in Congress who's seen it can share the contents on the House floor. Now that's a touchy one, but according to them, there's legal precedent here that they have immunity. They cannot be held liable for anything that they disclose on the floor. Now, whether any of them would do it or not, it's interesting. They mention in this article, they mention several. They mention Edward Snowden and a few others who broke the law and released what they believed was the illegal activity of the government. Now, they released secret information. And, of course, Snowden is still over in Russia because he would be arrested and probably put to death if they catch him. But what they're saying is congressmen can do it and not have to leave the country and not have any fear of retribution. But will they do it? All right, and number 4, the Republicans can leak everything they want to the news media. The Democrats have been doing it for a few years. The Democrats have been doing it since Mr. Trump got in office. They release, somebody said, how come this memo hasn't been released by a leaker? Because most of the leakers are Democrats and they have no reason to leak this, right? The Republicans could leak anything they want out of this and probably never be found out, and we could get it that way. But there's an interesting 5th way that this could be released. And this is the most interesting at all, and this isn't in the article. This I saw somewhere else. The 5th way this could be released is the President of the United States is given his address to the State of the Union address. What, January 20th? Hey, that's just a few days away. Wouldn't it be something if the president got up and declassified this that moment, stood up and said, I have now declassified the 4-page memo. I'd like to read it for you. And he reads it before all of Congress, the Senate and the House and the Supreme Court, all of them sitting in that room. Can you imagine that? And read the memo and give the proof that he's been unjustly accused. Wouldn't that be something, huh? Well, this is how a 4-page memo could give a wound to the beast. Not a deadly wound, because the beast is going to be here. And the one world order is coming. The one world government is coming. It's just around the corner. We're going to be taken out of here pretty soon. And the rapture, the trumpet's going to sound. And the Lord's taking the church home. And if you're saved, if you're born again, if you know the Lord Jesus as your Savior, you're going with us. And you'll be out of here. If you don't know the Lord, you'll be left behind. And you'll see this one world kingdom. If you live long enough, you'll be here to witness the terrible things that are getting ready to happen. So Anyway, the government, as of right now, Sunday night, we're in day 2 of the shutdown. So it's time to panic, right? We're going to starve. How are we going to make it without the government? We're going to be fine. There's nothing essential that's been shut down. Don't let them fool you. So, all right, hang in there. There's lots more to come. No telling what's coming this week with this memo. And we'll just, if for some reason the government decides not to release this thing, it'll get released. Somebody's going to get it out there, either leaking it or whatever. Interesting stuff, huh? Well, you've been listening to God's Final Jubilee program. God'sFinalJubilee.com is the website. You can see my books and DVDs on there. You can check out my podcast on there. You can check out the bookstore. Everything, the Facebook page. You can get to the Facebook page right from the website. So exciting days we're living in. We're in the last days. I believe that with all my heart. There's bad things coming upon the world. And you better make sure you're ready for it. We'll see you next time on the God's Final Jubilee program.